My son, Michael, called me useless the day after I retired. The words, echoing in the opulent new boardroom, had cut deeper than he could ever know. A casual dismissal of 40 years poured into the very company he now claimed as his own. But before I continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from. The clinking of champagne glasses, a celebratory symphony in the newly renovated boardroom, grated against my ears like fingernails on a chalkboard. Each sharp, joyful chime seemed to amplify the hollow ache in my chest. My son, Michael, stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, a spotlight beaming down on his perfectly coiffed hair, illuminating the triumphant, almost arrogant gleam in his eyes. He had just announced his promotion, effective immediately, to CEO of the very company I'd helped build, piece by arduous piece over 4 decades. A surge of paternal pride and instinctive unbidden warmth flickered within me. This was my legacy, taking flight on my son's capable shoulders, or so I thought. I, fresh from what was supposed to be a dignified retirement, prepared my carefully rehearsed speech, words of wisdom, encouragement, a passing of the torch. But before I could utter a single syllable, Michael's voice, amplified by the sudden hush in the room, cut through the air. "Honestly, Dad," he began, a casual wave of his hand dismissing my entire career, "it's probably for the best you're out. You were getting a bit useless anyway. Time for fresh blood." The words, delivered with a condescending smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, hit me harder than any physical blow. The entire boardroom seemed to hold its breath. I felt a wave of icy shock, then a simmering anger I hadn't known existed within my usually placid nature. Useless. That one word echoed in the sudden silence, bouncing off the sleek, modern walls, mocking my years of sacrifice. My carefully chosen retirement speech dissolved on my tongue, replaced by a metallic taste of betrayal. How could the son I'd sacrificed everything for, missed school plays, late nights, early mornings, every spare cent, betray me so completely, so publicly? The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered, festering. I walked out of the gleaming new office, the glass doors reflecting my tired, bewildered face back at me. The autumn sun, usually a comforting presence, felt harsh and unforgiving. The weight of my small box of belongings, a worn fountain pen, a framed photo of a younger, innocent Michael, and a faded company baseball cap felt heavier than any burden I'd carried in my 40 years at the firm. Each step down the pristine corridor felt like a retreat, a surrender. As I passed what used to be my executive suite, now adorned with Michael's name in tasteful, modern script on the frosted door, a strange detail snagged my attention. Beneath the opulent new executive desk, a faint, almost imperceptible line betrayed a loose floorboard. It was exactly where it had been when I'd first taken over that office, a small imperfection I'd always meant to fix, but never had. A pang of nostalgia, sharp and sudden, pierced me. It was swiftly followed by a bitter sting of betrayal. My office, my desk, his name. The thought was a raw wound. The firm had always been my sanctuary, my second home, the place where I'd poured all my creative energy, my dreams, my very lifeblood. Now, I was an outsider looking in, an unwanted ghost in the machine. Michael's contemptuous words, useless, still resonated, twisting the knife. I remembered his graduation, his eager questions about the business, his youthful admiration. Where had that boy gone? Had I been so blind, so absorbed in building this empire, that I hadn't seen the arrogance festering within him? The loose floorboard, a forgotten detail from my past, now felt like a nagging question. Could there be something more to Michael's sudden, seemingly effortless ascent, something hidden beneath the polished surface that I was missing? Retirement, once a cherished dream of quiet mornings and leisurely afternoons, quickly morphed into a lonely purgatory. My study, once a vibrant space of strategic planning and late-night brainstorming, now felt like a mausoleum. Books on market trends, Awards gleaming under soft lamplight all felt like relics of a past life, mocking my sudden irrelevance. My hands, accustomed to the tactile satisfaction of paperwork and the reassuring weight of a pen, now felt empty, restless. I scrolled through social media, a morbid habit I'd developed, and saw Michael's triumphant posts. Photos of him shaking hands with investors, grinning beside new product launches, each one a fresh stab to my already wounded pride. The ache wasn't just about his unkind words. It was the crushing realization that my life's work, my identity, had been summarily dismantled by my own son. The silence of the house, usually a comfort, now felt oppressive, amplifying the echo of useless. I picked up an old, leather-bound photo album from the shelf, its corners softened by countless touches. Inside, nestled amongst fading sepia tones, were the youthful faces of my deceased wife, Ilara, and a smiling, innocent Michael, perhaps 5 years old, sitting on my shoulders at a company picnic. He looked so happy, so trusting. A deep, paternal guilt washed over me. Had I been so consumed by the relentless pursuit of corporate success, so focused on providing a comfortable life, that I'd failed to truly know the man my son had become? Had I missed the subtle shifts, the hardening of his heart, the seeds of his ambition turning to something cold and self-serving? The photo, once a source of warmth, now felt like an indictment. It seemed to whisper, had I, in fact, been useless as a father? Days bled into weeks, marked by the rhythmic, taunting drip of rain against my study window. Each drop seemed to magnify my sense of aimlessness. Lost in a haze of nostalgia and growing unease, I decided to tackle the attic, a forgotten cavern of memories and forgotten paperwork. Perhaps sorting through the detritus of the past would somehow clarify the murky waters of my present. It was amidst a stack of dusty boxes, tucked away in a corner labeled Company Origins, that I stumbled upon it. A thick, cream-colored envelope, slightly yellowed with age, bearing my name in Ilara's elegant script. It was unsent. Inside, her familiar handwriting filled the pages. It wasn't the love letter, not exactly. It was a testament to her unwavering belief in my vision, her quiet sacrifices for my dreams. She wrote of the nights she'd balanced the books while I slept, the social events she'd navigated with grace, always promoting our fledgling company. But then, a cryptic passage caught my eye. She spoke of our secret weapon, a final safeguard, a way to secure our future no matter what. She'd hinted at something foundational, something more than just emotional support, but kept it veiled, almost playful in her phrasing. A profound longing for her washed over me, a physical ache in my chest. Ilara, my pragmatic, intelligent wife, had always been my rock, my silent partner. To think she had kept such a significant secret, a weapon from me, even out of love, twisted my gut. But then, a chilling premonition, cold as the attic air, snaked its way into my thoughts. Why hadn't she sent this letter? And what exactly was this secret weapon she alluded to? The rain outside intensified, a drumming crescendo to my mounting apprehension. Could this forgotten letter, these cryptic words from the woman I loved and lost, hold the key to understanding Michael's callousness, or perhaps to dismantling it? The cryptic words of Ilara's letter burned in my mind, a relentless ember of suspicion. Our secret weapon, she'd written. The phrase pulsed with an unsettling energy, urging me to act. Driven by a gnawing suspicion that had now fully solidified into resolve, I dusted off my old company access card. It was a gamble, hoping it hadn't been deactivated or that Michael hadn't thought to cancel it. To my surprise, the security gates at the offsite archives clicked open with a familiar hum. The archives were a cavernous, forgotten space, a mausoleum of paper, untouched by the sleek digital efficiency of Michael's new regime. Row upon row of metal shelving stretched into the dimness, overflowing with decades of company paperwork, invoices, memos, contracts, all gathering a thick layer of dust. The air was heavy with the smell of aging paper and forgotten ambition. I bypassed the digital records, knowing Michael would have sanitized them. My instinct told me to go physical, to hunt for the truth in the tangible. I spent hours, days even, immersed in the past, feeling like a ghost navigating my own history. My fingers, once so adept at signing million-dollar deals, now meticulously traced lines in forgotten ledgers, deciphering faded ink. It was tedious work, eye-straining and mind-numbing, but a relentless focus propelled me. Then, in a binder marked Initial Capitalization and Founders Agreements, 1980, I found them. Not glaring errors, but subtle discrepancies. Small, almost invisible anomalies in the acquisition documents from the company's earliest days, specifically concerning the initial seed funding. Shell companies I didn't recognize were listed as primary investors, funneling substantial capital. They had odd, almost whimsical names. Phoenix Ascent Holdings, Starlight Ventures, names that resonated with Elara's creative spirit, not the staid world of corporate finance. The discovery was small, almost insignificant on its own, but potent. It was a faint flicker of light in the deepening gloom, igniting a dangerous obsession. The air in the archives, once stale, now crackled with a quiet tension. I packed my briefcase, the weight of these fragile papers a new kind of treasure. Michael's new blood might be flowing through the company's veins, but was its foundation built on secrets Elara had entrusted to the forgotten ledgers? Chapter 6. The Curious Case of the Shell Company. The names of those shell companies, Phoenix Ascent Holdings, Starlight Ventures, and a few others equally poetic, replayed in my mind like a broken record. They were so utterly unlike the dry corporate nomenclature I was familiar with. They were whimsical, almost romantic names. Elara, the thought whispered, then roared in my head. My wife, who penned poetry in her spare time and found beauty in the mundane. Who always saw the bigger picture beyond my spreadsheets. I had been too busy being the public face, the innovator, to truly pay attention to the silent architect working in the shadows. Now, those memories swirled with a growing sense of unease, intertwined with a bittersweet remembrance of her quiet strength. I spent hours at the public library, cross-referencing old business registries, delving into microfiche archives, an archaic process that felt oddly comforting in its solidity. I found that these shell companies, registered in different states, had indeed been dissolved decades ago, leaving barely a trace. But their initial filings, dating back to the very foundation of my company, showed a single, recurring individual listed as the principal owner for all of them. The name wasn't mine. A terrifying hypothesis, cold and clear, began to solidify in my mind. The air in the library, usually so still, suddenly felt charged with a profound revelation. It wasn't just that Michael had been disrespectful. He was occupying a throne he might not have legally inherited. This wasn't about my hurt pride anymore. It was about something far larger, far more foundational. Could these forgotten names, these whimsical creations of my late wife, hold the absolute, undeniable key to my son's undeserved power and ultimately to his downfall? The name on those old shell company documents, though obscured by decades, had been enough of a lead. It was my wife's maiden name, Elara. The realization was a punch to the gut. All those years, she had been working silently, a financial ghost in the machine. Now, I needed proof, concrete evidence that would stand up in any courtroom. I tracked down a retired notary public, Mrs. Henderson, a sharp-witted woman in her late 70s with a formidable memory and an even more formidable stack of meticulously organized ledgers. Her small, cozy home smelled of lavender and old paper. Over lukewarm tea and slightly stale biscuits, I subtly steered the conversation to the early days of my company. Mrs. Henderson's eyes, bright and alert, crinkled at the corners. "Oh, that was a busy time. Your wife, Ilara, she was a force, wasn't she? So particular about her paperwork." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Ilara?" I tried to keep my voice even, casual. "Yes, dear. Came to me often, especially in those early years, setting up those, what were they called? Little holding companies. Very hush-hush, but all perfectly legal, of course. She said they were for long-term strategic planning, always so far ahead of her time." Mrs. Henderson chuckled, a fond, wistful sound. Then, with a knowing look that hinted at professional discretion, she excused herself, returning moments later with a surprisingly heavy, leather-bound ledger. Its pages were filled with elegant copperplate script, a testament to a bygone era of meticulous record-keeping. She flipped to a specific section. "Here we are. Signatures for Phoenix Ascent Holdings, Starlight Ventures, and a few others. All notarized, all legitimate." My wife's maiden name was there, clearly and repeatedly, appearing as the principal behind the shell companies acting on behalf of an anonymous trust. The dates aligned precisely with the initial seed funding for my company. A jolt of pure adrenaline, mixed with an overwhelming wave of grief for Ilara's hidden strength and genius, coursed through me. My hands trembled as I took the ledger. This wasn't just proof, it was a revelation. Ilara hadn't just been a supportive wife. She had been the silent, foundational architect of our entire enterprise, meticulously laying the financial groundwork while I was out shaking hands and closing deals. The full weight of Michael's disrespect, unknowingly aimed at his own grandmother's legacy, crashed down on me. My wife wasn't just a supporter. She was the mastermind. And now, armed with her forgotten ledger, I finally understood the true ownership of Michael's empire. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave, leaving me breathless and reeling. Ilara, my quiet, artistic wife, not I, had been the true financial architect of our company's foundation. While I had been the public face, the relentless innovator, the one selling the dream, she had quietly, brilliantly secured the critical initial investments. She had channeled them through those cleverly disguised shell corporations, not to hide anything illicit, but to shield our nascent venture from unnecessary public scrutiny and potential competitors during its most vulnerable stage. It was a stroke of genius, a move far more sophisticated than anything I had considered at the time. I returned home, the notary's ledger clutched in my hand, my mind a whirlwind of awe and profound sorrow. The heirlooms and photos on my mantelpieces, once mere decorations, now seemed to glow with her unseen influence, imbued with a new, deeper meaning. Her favorite silver locket, always around her neck, suddenly felt like a symbol of her hidden power. The scent of her jasmine perfume, still faintly clinging to an old scarf in her closet, felt like a silent testament to her enduring presence. A potent mix of deep sorrow for her unsung genius and a fierce, protective anger for her legacy flared within me. Michael hadn't just slighted me. He had unknowingly, arrogantly insulted the very foundation of his own grandmother's brilliance. He stood atop a mountain built not by his efforts, but by her foresight, a foresight he was now carelessly eroding. The full weight of his useless comment twisted into something far more offensive. He was calling the source of his entire existence, his very platform, useless. The memory of Ilara's quiet smiles, her encouraging words, her unwavering belief in our future, now resonated with a new, deeper meaning. She had built a fortress around our dreams, a financial stronghold I hadn't even realized existed. My hand instinctively reached for an old framed photo of her, her eyes twinkling with a secret amusement I now understood. This wasn't just about reclaiming my dignity. It was about honoring hers. And Michael, utterly oblivious to the true architect of his success, was about to learn a lesson in humility he would never forget. Armed with the shattering truth of Ilara's foundational ownership, my anger solidified into a cold, calculating resolve. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was a crusade to protect her legacy. I began discreetly monitoring Michael's business dealings, utilizing the few remaining contacts I had within the company, loyalists who owed me favors and were quietly disgusted by Michael's behavior. The reports that filtered back were grim. I saw a pattern of reckless, short-sighted decisions, driven by arrogance and a hunger for quick, superficial wins. Michael was leveraging company assets like a high roller at a casino, making risky, ill-advised acquisitions that bled funds, and alienating long-term cornerstone clients with his dismissive attitude. He was gutting the company's carefully built goodwill, all to inflate his own image, to appear as the savior who was dragging a useless firm into the modern age. I reviewed the financial statements I managed to obtain, my eyes scanning for familiar patterns of stability and growth, only to find red flags. Debt was accumulating. Key research and development projects were being shelved in favor of flashy but ultimately hollow marketing campaigns. The company, which Ilara and I had nurtured like a fragile plant, was slowly, systematically being dismantled by his unchecked ambition. One evening, I overheard a snippet of conversation from a former colleague at a local coffee shop. "Michael's tearing it apart, piece by piece," the man muttered, shaking his head. "Doesn't care about anything but the next quarter's numbers and his bonus." The words stung, but they also clarified my purpose. I wasn't just dealing with a disrespectful son. I was dealing with a destructive force threatening everything Ilara and I had built. The anger that had simmered for weeks now sharpened into a surgical precision. He wouldn't just be exposed. I would save Ilara's legacy from ruin, and he would watch it happen. With the notary's ledger and Ilara's unsent letter as my ammunition, I knew I couldn't fight Michael on my own. I needed a strategist, someone who understood the intricate dance of corporate law. I sought out Ms. Davies, a shrewd, understated corporate lawyer with a reputation for unraveling complex historical cases. Her office, unlike Michael's gleaming palace, was warm and filled with towering bookshelves, exuding an aura of quiet authority. She listened patiently, her expression unreadable, as I laid out my story, presenting the ledger, the old incorporation documents, and Ilara's letter. She spent days meticulously poring over the paperwork, her sharp eyes scanning every clause, every archaic legal phrase. The silence from her office was unnerving, punctuated only by the rustle of paper. Then her call came. "Mr. Davis," she said, her voice calm, but with an undeniable tremor of excitement. "You were right. It's here." I drove to her office, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. She pointed to a faded paragraph in the original Articles of Incorporation, tucked away in an appendix, a clause so obscure it likely had been forgotten by everyone but its original drafters, Ilara.
This clause, tied directly to the ownership stakes of those initial shell companies, stated that should the primary beneficiary of these initial investments be deemed unfit by a majority of the original founding investors, which she explained was essentially Ilara and by extension her estate, then ownership of those stakes, and thus the controlling interest in the company, reverted. "This is a fail-safe, Mr. Davis," Ms. Davis explained, her voice precise. "Your wife, with incredible foresight, built in a mechanism to protect her initial investment, and by extension the company itself, from reckless stewardship. Since you are the executor of her estate, you have the authority to activate this clause." A surge of triumph, cold and sharp, coursed through me, but it was a quiet, almost sad victory. There was no joy, only a grim satisfaction. The mechanism for my revenge was lawful, airtight, and devastatingly effective. It wasn't about public humiliation, not directly. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully ours, legally. The thought of Michael's face when he learned the full extent of Ilara's genius sent a shiver down my spine. The legal loophole wasn't just a technicality. It was the precise, elegant instrument of justice Ilara had crafted decades ago, and its deployment would be catastrophic for my son.
The air in the boardroom was thick with an almost palpable tension. I had requested an emergency board meeting, citing unforeseen revelations regarding company ownership. Michael, arrogant and dismissive as ever, barely bothered to hide his contempt. He sat at the head of the table, radiating an insolent confidence, a smirk playing on his lips. He probably thought I was going to beg for a severance package or some kind of advisory role. He couldn't have been more wrong. I sat opposite him, Miss Davies, a quiet, formidable presence at my side. The board members, a mix of old guard and Michael's new appointees, shifted uneasily in their seats. The hushed whispers died as I cleared my throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. "Gentlemen and Miss Albright," I began, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within me. "I've called this meeting to address a rather significant oversight regarding the foundational ownership of this company." Michael scoffed. "An oversight, Dad? Retired men tend to see ghosts. We've reviewed all ownership documents thoroughly." "Have you, Michael?" I met his gaze, holding it, my hand beneath the table clenched into a fist. Miss Davies then, calmly, methodically, began to present the evidence. She started with the notary's ledger, its faded ink a stark contrast to the gleaming digital screens around us. She projected images of the original incorporation documents, highlighting the names of the shell companies. She then displayed Ilara's unsent letter, its words, though private, clearly articulating her intent to establish the foundational investments through these entities, to protect the company. I watched Michael's face. It was a slow, agonizing process. His initial sneering confidence began to crack. His eyes narrowed, then widened in disbelief. The smirk vanished, replaced by a dawning horror as the implications of Miss Davies' presentation slowly, inexorably became clear. He looked from the documents to me, then back again, his face paling, a vein throbbing in his temple. The carefully constructed facade of his empire began to show fissures, then crumble. The son who had called me useless was about to discover, in the most public and humiliating way possible, who the true, undisputed owner of his world really was. As Miss Davies calmly and clinically articulated the legal ramifications of the long-forgotten clause, the boardroom descended into stunned silence. The air crackled with disbelief, then outright shock. She explained how, as the executor of Ilara's estate,
I had the undeniable legal authority to activate the clause, which, given Michael's demonstrable mismanagement and reckless endangerment of the company's long-term stability, as detailed in a concise report she had also circulated, rendered him unfit by the standards Ilara had set. Michael, pale and shaking, finally erupted. "This is insane, a stunt. My mother wouldn't—" He tried to interrupt, to discredit, to deny, his voice rising in a desperate, panicked crescendo. But the evidence, presented with such cool, irrefutable precision, was overwhelming. The original documents, the notary's ledger, Ilara's strategic foresight, it all painted an undeniable picture. The board members, initially incredulous, began to murmur amongst themselves, their expressions shifting from skepticism to grim acceptance. They knew Michael's track record, his short-term gains masking long-term damage. Now, with the legal framework laid bare, they saw the truth. The controlling interest in the company, stemming from Ilara's initial, cleverly disguised investments, had never truly belonged to me, nor to Michael by direct inheritance. It belonged to the estate, with me as its legally empowered executor. I held the power to act on its behalf, to make executive decisions, to essentially reclaim the throne. Michael's carefully constructed empire crumbled before his eyes. His shoulders slumped, his defiant posture collapsing under the crushing weight of the revelation. He wasn't just being ousted, he was being disinherited, legally and completely, from the very company he believed he owned. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of betrayal and raw, uncomprehending hurt. I felt no joy, only a profound weariness, a deep sorrow for the son I had lost. The son who had been so blinded by ambition, he never saw the love or the genius that had built his world. The rain that had started again, softly tapping against the boardroom windows, seemed to weep with me. The truth, once revealed, shattered more than just a company. It shattered a family, leaving behind a stark, undeniable emptiness.
In the tumultuous aftermath of the boardroom revelation, Michael was removed as CEO, his reign collapsing in a spectacular, albeit private, implosion. His reputation, carefully crafted and polished, lay in tatters within the industry. There were no public pronouncements of his failings, no gleeful press conferences from me. I didn't gloat, didn't make a public spectacle of his downfall. That wasn't Ilara's way, and it wasn't mine. As the executor of Ilara's estate, I quietly, firmly took control. My first act was a concise, factual press release detailing the restructuring of company leadership due to a clarification of foundational ownership. It was anodyne, professional, leaving enough room for speculation but providing no fodder for scandal. The focus was on stability, on the future, not on recrimination. I began the slow, painstaking process of undoing Michael's reckless decisions. I pulled back from the risky acquisitions, re-engaged the alienated clients, and reinvested in the core R&D projects he had abandoned. It was like repairing a delicate, intricate clock that had been violently shaken. Each adjustment was careful, deliberate, aimed at restoring the company's integrity and its original vision. One crisp autumn afternoon, I drove to Ilara's grave, the sky a vast, melancholic gray. I placed a fresh bouquet of her favorite lilies on the polished stone, their delicate scent a bittersweet comfort. I stood there for a long time, the silence profound, a silent acknowledgement of her unseen strength, her incredible foresight. The burden of justice, of righting this profound wrong felt heavy, but necessary. There was no elation, only a quiet, resolute determination. The wind whispered through the trees, a faint echo of her steady presence. The quiet dignity of my actions, a mirror of Alara's own strategic brilliance, spoke louder than any vengeful roar, beginning the long process of healing the wounds Michael had inflicted. Months passed, marked by the gradual, steady hum of the company regaining its equilibrium. The initial shockwave of Michael's removal had settled, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose amongst the long-serving employees. I was busy, more so than I had anticipated in retirement, but it was a meaningful, healing kind of busy. Then, a crumpled, tear-stained envelope arrived in my mail. The handwriting, once so bold and confident, was now shaky, almost illegible in places. It was from Michael. I opened it with a mix of apprehension and a strange, unfamiliar flicker of hope. The letter was full of apologies, raw, unvarnished regret. He spoke of his arrogance, his ignorance, his complete lack of understanding of the company's true origins. He hadn't known about Alara's role, hadn't grasped the true depth of my sacrifices or the painstaking foundation she had laid. He wrote of his shame, his confusion, his lost sense of identity. He spoke of wanting to learn, to rebuild, not just the company, but our relationship, if such a thing were even possible. "Dad," he wrote, "I was so wrong. I was so blind. I need to understand." I reread the letter countless times, each word a painful incision, a slow, agonizing release of the tension that had gripped me for so long. My initial anger had slowly faded, replaced by a complex mix of sorrow for what he had become and a tentative, fragile hope for what he might yet be. The image of the innocent boy from the photo album resurfaced, superimposed over the broken man who had penned the letter. The silence in my study was no longer oppressive. It was contemplative. Could the threads of our broken family, so violently severed, ever truly be rewoven? Or was the damage too profound, too final? I responded to Michael's letter, not with an immediate offer of forgiveness, for that would be too simple, too easy. Instead, I offered an invitation, not to his old position, not to a place of power, but to come back to the company as an apprentice, to learn the true values from the ground up, to understand the foundations, the meticulous craft, the respect for every person in every process that Alara and I had poured into it. To earn back trust, starting with the quiet dignity of hard work and humility. He accepted. He started at the lowest rung, learning the manufacturing process, sitting in on basic client calls, his once crisp suits replaced by a simple company uniform. He was quiet, attentive, a shadow of his former arrogant self. The transformation was slow, almost imperceptible at first, but it was there. In the way he listened, the way he asked questions, the way he occasionally caught my eye with a flicker of humility. I, in turn, dedicated myself to ensuring Alara's legacy would not only be acknowledged but amplified. I initiated a foundation in her name, dedicated to supporting emerging female entrepreneurs in STEM, ensuring her silent brilliance would empower future generations. The Phoenix Ascent Foundation became a symbol of intelligent, quiet innovation. One crisp morning, I walked through the revitalized factory floor, now humming with efficient, purposeful activity. Michael, in a slightly flour-dusted apron, was working in the new product development lab, helping to refine a new, ethically sourced ingredient line, exactly the kind of sustainable innovation Alara would have championed. He looked up, his face smudged, and offered a small, tentative smile that reached his eyes this time. I smiled back, a genuine smile that felt light and free. I hadn't just reclaimed a company, I was beginning the painstaking process of mending a family, honoring the true owner of our legacy one step at a time. The quiet hum of a healthy, growing business, the purposeful activity, and the tentative smiles shared with my son were all the justice I needed. The company, forged in quiet genius, had been saved, and in its rebirth, so too was a sliver of hope for a father and son.